A lot of people who have an interest in therapy or self-development are interested in their own attachment styles. I'm going to simplify this and just go through the common ones today. So we've got secure attachment, where people actually attach well in relationships, form relationships quite easily, maintain those relationships, and there's low conflict in those relationships. They're quite good at resolving conflict that comes up. Then we've got anxious attachment style, where this person is preoccupied, they worry a lot about their relationships, and they overthink things. So often they feel quite insecure in their relationships and need a lot of reassurance. And then we've got avoidant attachment style, where people withdraw quite a lot from their relationships. They feel a lot of pressure and overwhelmed with the intimacy that's required of relationships, and therefore it feels more comfortable for them to keep their distance or withdraw from time to time. So in therapy, I often see people who've got anxious attachment style the most, and I will see those far more than people who've got avoidant attachment style. The reason being is that when people have anxious attachment style, their relationships cause them a lot of distress. They're preoccupied with them, they think about them a lot, and they really want to solve the problems that relationships cause them. Now, avoidant attachment style individuals don't tend to seek out therapy so much because their behavior tends to be to withdraw. If a relationship is putting too much pressure on them, then they distance themselves and they feel okay. So therefore, they're not really experiencing the high levels of distress that the anxious person is experiencing. However, these two individuals will often come together and try to have relationships with one another, and quite unsuccessfully, because there will be a lot of drama and conflict in these relationships. They're not necessarily going to be easy relationships where there's good quality communication that comes easily for both individuals, because their two attachment styles have similarities, but they're very conflicting and they're doing very opposite behaviors. There's often a lot of push-pull in these relationships, and both people's attachment styles are being activated again and again in the relationship, and that's kind of the repetition compulsion that people are participating in that's actually reactivating past trauma from their early life experiences. So for people to understand their attachment styles, they want to perhaps consider their early life relationships with their primary caregiver. Was that relationship quite easily? Were their needs met? Or was it more complicated? Was their primary caregiver unavailable? Were they working all the time? Were they drinking all the time, causing them to be emotionally unavailable? Or did the child have a lot of responsibility to perhaps act like a parent and care for their parent? Perhaps the child-parent relationship was very smothering. And while it's not always easy to make assumptions as to what type of parenting style leads to certain attachments, it's always quite helpful for people who have attachment difficulties to consider the type of parenting that they received and what those early life experiences were like for them. Was there difficulties with those early life relationships that are actually reflected in the relationships they have now with individuals? So what I commonly see in clinical practice is an anxious individual, which tends to be more common females than males, but can be males as well, and they will chase the avoidant partner. The avoidant partner tends to be males more often, of course not always. So we've got in the early stages, we have got the avoidant partner not being triggered. They feel comfortable because perhaps they're pursuing the relationship. Perhaps they're pursuing a relationship with someone who they perceive as being highly valuable, of high quality, someone who's a bit of a challenge for them, and they don't have any intimacy issues triggered at this point because they feel secure. They don't feel like anyone is trying to trap them into intimacy. And a little bit later on in the relationship, when the anxious person starts to perhaps worry a little bit about the relationship, or tries to get closer, or needs a lot of reassurance because they're preoccupied with relationships, then that's when the avoidant partner will retreat. They will need their space, they'll feel overwhelmed, and they will want to talk their way out of the relationship in whatever way possible in order to maintain their independence. And this dance might go on for a really long time. perhaps the avoidant person might decide, actually, I'm going to move on. I'm going to leave that one. I'm going to stop obsessing over that relationship, and I'm actually going to go for a relationship where my needs are better met. Then sometimes what we see is that the avoidant individual will come straight back, offer that reassurance that they were so reluctant to give before, persuade the anxious person back into the relationship. And of course, the anxious person never really wanted to leave in the first place. So therefore, they're quite easily persuaded back in, because they only left because they didn't feel loved and they weren't reassured. They did not leave because they did not like the avoidant partner. So they get their reassurance, they're persuaded back into the relationship, and the whole dance happens again. They need intimacy, they need reassurance, they're preoccupied because they're anxious, and the avoidant partner feels smothered again. And they retreat, distance themselves, and then it triggers a lot of anxiety in the anxious, preoccupied person. And these two individuals can go on for years and years, toing and froing, breaking up, getting back together, and doing this dance that's really not very healthy for anyone. And often people will do this without having much awareness of their attachment styles. Some people will have high level of awareness of their attachment styles, but they'll still find themselves in these very emotionally driven situations because it's re-triggering their attachment styles, and that's what people will often feel that they need. They will go with their emotions, they'll go with what feels familiar for them. So it's better off for these individuals to actually just decide to be in relationships with a secure partner, because if one person in the relationship is secure, then they can play out the relationships in a very uncomplicated way. If they're with an anxious partner, they can give the reassurance that's required, they can be available, they can set appropriate boundaries, they can make sure that that person knows they're not going anywhere, and they can offer consistency. However, the problem is that the anxious partner might get bored and actually leave the available, secure partner. And then we've got the anxious partner. So if they enter into a relationship with someone who's securely attached, they get consistency, but they don't tend to feel so smothered in the relationship. However, that might not be exciting enough for them, and they may prefer going and seeking out the needy partner, or seeking out multiple relationships and needing a lot of validation from chasing the prize, which might be someone that they perceive as highly valuable, only to throw that partner away and not want them anymore once they get their prize.